The fluorescent lights of Rosie's diner flickered like dying fireflies, casting uneven shadows across the cracked linoleum floor. Sarah Chen had worked the dinner shift for 3 years, and she'd learned to navigate the chaos with her eyes half-closed, balancing plates, dodging grabby hands, and pretending not to hear the comments about her worn uniform or the dark circles under her eyes. At 26, she felt 40. That's what being a single mom to a 5-year-old did to you. That's what surviving did to you. Table 4 needs ketchup, Rita barked from behind the counter, not even looking up from the register. And table 9 just sat down. Big party. Look sharp. Sarah grabbed the ketchup bottle and turned toward the dining room, but froze when she caught sight of table 9 through the pass-through window. 6 men in dark suits had arranged themselves with military precision around the large corner booth. They weren't looking at menus. They were scanning exits, watching the pair, the door, hands resting inside their jackets, in a way that made Sarah's stomach clench. And in the center of it all sat a 7th man who made the others look like shadows. He was maybe 35, with dark hair styled perfectly despite the late hour, and a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and cold calculation. His charcoal suit probably cost more than Sarah's car. When his gray eyes swept across the diner, people instinctively looked away, like prey animals sensing a predator. But it was the small boy sitting rigidly beside him that made Sarah's heart crack open. The child couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, dressed in an expensive little suit that matched his father's, his dark curls carefully combed. But his eyes, God, his eyes looked ancient, haunted. He sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, staring at the table like he was trying to disappear into it. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Sarah. Rita's voice cut through her thoughts. Table 9. Now. And for the love of God, don't mess this up. That's Dante Moretti. The name meant nothing to Sarah. She'd only moved to Chicago 8 months ago, fleeing Indianapolis and memories she couldn't bear to carry anymore. She didn't follow local news or gossip. She worked, took care of her son, and survived. That was it. Who? Sarah asked, grabbing her order pad. Rita stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Dante Moretti, as in the Moretti family. As in, you smile, you take their order, and you don't ask questions. Got it? Sarah's pulse quickened, but she nodded. She'd dealt with difficult customers before. How bad could it be? She approached table 9 with her practiced smile firmly in place, the one that said friendly but not too friendly, the one that usually got her through shifts without incident. But as she got closer, that smile faltered. The little boy's hands were moving, not fidgeting, moving with purpose. His small fingers formed shapes in his lap, quick and desperate, over and over again. Sarah's breath caught as recognition slammed into her like a freight train. Sign language. The boy was signing, and no one at the table was paying attention. Not the men in suits who were too busy watching the exits, not even his father, who was reviewing something on his phone with the intensity of a surgeon examining x-rays. Sarah's mind flashed back 7 years, to her younger brother Tommy before the accident that took him. Tommy had been born deaf, and Sarah had learned sign language as a teenager so she could talk to him, really talk to him, in a way that made him feel seen and heard and valued. She'd promised herself after Tommy died that she'd never let that knowledge fade, that if she ever met someone who needed it, she'd use it. The boy's hands moved again, and this time Sarah was close enough to read the signs clearly. Help me, please, help. Her heart stopped. Good evening, gentlemen, Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. Can I start you off with something to drink? The suited men barely glanced at her. One of them, a heavy-set guy with a scar across his jaw, grunted, Coffee, black. 6 of them. But Dante Moretti looked up from his phone, and Sarah felt the full weight of those gray eyes settling on her like a physical touch. Up close, he was even more intimidating. There was something coiled about him, like a spring wound too tight, ready to snap at any moment. Water for my son? He said, his voice smooth and cultured with just a hint of an Italian accent. And, he glanced at the boy, the chicken fingers, extra fries. The boy didn't react, didn't even look at the menu, just kept staring at his lap, hands still moving in those same desperate signs. Help me, please, someone help. Sarah's professional smile slipped. She looked at the boy, then at Dante, then back at the boy. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to mind her business, to not get involved with whatever was happening at this table. But then the boy's eyes lifted to meet hers, just for a second, and Sarah saw something in them that made her decision. Pure, unfiltered terror. She set down her order pad and did something that would change all their lives forever. Sarah's hands moved into the familiar patterns she'd learned so long ago, signing slowly and clearly so the boy could see. "Hello, my name is Sarah. What's your name?" The transformation was instant and devastating. The boy's head snapped up so fast she heard his neck crack. His dark eyes went wide with shock, then filled with tears that spilled down his cheeks before he could stop them. For a moment, he just stared at her like she was a ghost or an angel or something equally impossible. Then his small hands flew into motion, signing so frantically that Sarah had to focus hard to keep up. "You can understand me? You really see me? Please, I need help. He's not my Marco." The single word from Dante Moretti cut through the air like a blade. The scarred man Marco was suddenly standing, his hand inside his jacket, eyes locked on Sarah with deadly intent. "Boss," Marco said quietly. "She's signing to the kid." The entire table went silent. All 6 bodyguards turned to stare at Sarah with expressions ranging from shock to suspicion to something that looked almost like fear. But it was Dante's reaction that made Sarah's blood run cold. He stood slowly, deliberately, his considerable height making him tower over her. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but it carried the kind of authority that made grown men flinch. "You know sign language." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Yes," Sarah said, forcing herself not to step back. "My brother was deaf. I learned to communicate with him." "Was," Dante repeated, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Past tense. He died 7 years ago." Sarah lifted her chin, refusing to be intimidated even though her knees felt like water. "But I never forgot." Dante studied her for a long moment, and Sarah had the unsettling feeling he was seeing past her shabby uniform and tired face, reading secrets she didn't even know she was keeping. Then he looked down at the boy, and his expression shifted into something Sarah couldn't quite identify. Not anger, not exactly, but something raw and painful and desperately controlled. "What did he say to you?" Dante asked, his voice quiet enough that only Sarah could hear. Sarah hesitated. The boy was shaking now, his small hands gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles had gone white. Whatever was happening here, whatever the situation was, she was in the middle of it now, whether she wanted to be or not. "He asked for help," Sarah said honestly, because something told her lying to this man would be far more dangerous than telling the truth. "Help with what?" "I don't know." "He didn't finish before you." Sarah gestured vaguely at the table, at Marco, still standing with his hand inside his jacket, at the sudden tension that had turned the booth into a pressure cooker. Dante's jaw tightened. He looked at the boy again, and this time when he signed, his movements were stiff and unpracticed, like someone who'd learned the basics but never quite mastered the language. "What do you need help with, Piccolo?" The boy's response was immediate and heartbreaking. His small hands moved with desperate speed as fresh tears streamed down his face. "I don't want to go back to him. He hurts me when you're not there. He says you don't care. He says I'm worthless and stupid, and that's why you leave me with him. Please don't make me go back. Please." Sarah watched Dante's face as he followed the signs, and what she saw there terrified her more than anything else that had happened tonight. His expression went from controlled calm to absolute fury in the span of a heartbeat. His hands clenched into fists, and the temperature in the booth seemed to drop 20 degrees. "Who?" Dante signed back, his movements sharp and angry now. "Who hurts you?" But before the boy could answer, the diner's door chimed, and a new figure walked in. He was younger than Dante, maybe early 30s, with the same dark hair and similar features, handsome in a way that probably charmed a lot of people, but there was something off about his smile. Something predatory. "Dante!" he called out cheerfully, completely oblivious to the tension at the table. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare." The boy went rigid. His entire body locked up like he'd been electrocuted, and a small sound escaped his throat, not quite a scream, but close. His hands moved frantically, signing the same word over and over. Him, him, him. It's him. Sarah didn't think. She simply reacted. She stepped between the boy and the newcomer, her body blocking his view even though she had no idea who he was or what was happening. All she knew was that this child was terrified, and every maternal instinct she possessed was screaming at her to protect him. "Excuse me, miss," the newcomer said, his smile never faltering. "I need to collect my nephew. Family business." "Your nephew," Sarah repeated, looking back at Dante. "Is this your brother?" "Half-brother," Dante said, and his voice had gone flat and emotionless in a way that was somehow more frightening than anger. "Luca, meet my half-brother Vincent. Vincent handles some of my business interests." Vincent's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "And little Nico here helps me with those interests, don't you, buddy?" He reached past Sarah to ruffle the boy's hair, and the child flinched so violently he nearly fell out of the booth. "Don't touch him," Sarah said before she could stop herself. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Vincent's hand froze mid-reach. Marco and the other bodyguards shifted uncomfortably. Even the few other customers in the diner seemed to sense something was wrong, their conversations dying into uneasy silence. Vincent's pleasant expression cracked, revealing something cold and cruel underneath. "I'm sorry. Who are you exactly?" "She's the waitress," Dante said quietly, his eyes never leaving his half-brother's face. "And apparently, she's the only person my son trusts enough to tell the truth." The air between the two men crackled with tension. Sarah could feel the weight of years of history, of family politics and power struggles she couldn't begin to understand. But she could understand the terror on the little boy's face, the way he was pressing himself against the booth's wall like he was trying to melt into it. "Dante," Vincent said, his voice taking on a placating tone. "I don't know what the kid told this woman, but you know how children are. Dramatic. He probably got scared during one of our training sessions and training sessions," Dante repeated softly. Then, to Sarah, "What exactly did my son tell you? Word for word." Sarah's mouth went dry. She could feel Vincent's eyes on her, could sense the threat emanating from him like heat from a furnace. But the boy Nico was looking at her with such desperate hope that she wouldn't stay silent. "He said someone hurts him when you're not there," Sarah said, meeting Dante's eyes. "He said this person tells him he's worthless and stupid. He said he doesn't want to go back to whoever that person is." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Dante moved, and Sarah had never seen anyone move that fast. 1 second, he was standing by the booth. The next, he had Vincent slammed against the wall, forearm pressed against his half-brother's throat, with enough force to cut off air. "You touched my son," Dante said, and his voice was so cold it made Sarah's spine ice over. "You hurt my child." Vincent's face was turning red, his hands clawing at Dante's arm. "I was making him strong," he choked out. "The kid's soft, weak. I was doing you a favor." The crack of Dante's fist connecting with Vincent's jaw echoed through the diner like a gunshot. Vincent crumpled, and only Dante's grip on his collar kept him from hitting the floor. "Marco," Dante said calmly, as if he hadn't just knocked a man unconscious. "Take Vincent to the basement at the Prometheus building. Make sure he's comfortable. We'll have a long conversation about family loyalty later." "Yes, boss." Marco and another bodyguard dragged Vincent's limp form toward the back exit, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Dante turned back to the booth, and Sarah watched his mask of cold fury crumble when he looked at his son. He knelt down beside the booth, bringing himself to the boy's eye level, and when he signed, his movements were gentle despite the violence he'd just committed. "I'm sorry, Nico. I'm so sorry I didn't know. I should have seen it. I should have protected. To you." The little boy launched himself into his father's arms, sobbing silently against his shoulder. Dante held him like he was made of glass, one large hand cradling the back of Nico's head while the other rubbed soothing circles on his back. Sarah stood frozen, processing what had just happened. A man had been beaten and dragged away. The boy had revealed abuse, and she was standing in the middle of it all, a witness to something that probably should have gotten her killed. Instead, Dante looked up at her with those gray eyes, and she saw something in them that made her breath catch, not gratitude that would have been too simple. It was something deeper, more complex. Recognition, maybe. Or respect. "You're coming with us," he said quietly. "What?" "No, I have to finish my shift. I have a son waiting at home with the babysitter." "You have a son." Dante's expression shifted, and suddenly he was looking at her differently. Not as a waitress. Not even as the woman who'd helped his child. But as someone who might understand what he was feeling. "How old?" "5, Sarah heard herself say. His name is Ethan. Nico is 5'2", Dante said softly. He stood, still holding his son against his chest. Mrs. Chen, it is Mrs. Miss. And it's just Sarah. Sarah. The way he said her name made it sound like something precious. My son hasn't spoken a word since his mother died 2 years ago. Not to me, not to doctors, not to anyone. Selective mutism, they call it. Trauma-induced. He paused, and Sarah could see the pain etched into every line of his face. You're the first person he's tried to communicate with in 24 months. Sarah's heart clenched. She looked at Nico, who had turned his tear-stained face toward her, his dark eyes holding the same desperate plea she'd seen earlier. I can't just leave my job, Sarah said weakly. I need this job. I have rent and bills and… How much do you make in a month? Dante asked. I don't see how that's… humor. Me. Sarah swallowed hard. About 2,000. With tips, maybe 2,500 on a good month. Dante pulled out his wallet and counted out bills without even looking at them. He walked over to Rita at the register and placed what looked like several $1,000s on the counter. That's 6 months of her salary, he said calmly. She's done here. Now wait just a minute, Rita started. But one look from Dante shut her up immediately. He turned back to Sarah. You're worried about your son. I understand. We'll pick him up from your babysitter together. You'll both stay at my home tonight, where you're safe and protected. Tomorrow, we'll discuss long-term arrangements. You can't just kidnap me, Sarah protested, even as her mind raced. 6 months' salary, protection, safety. God, when was the last time she'd felt truly safe? I'm not kidnapping you, Dante's voice gentled. I'm offering you a position. My son needs someone who can communicate with him, who he trusts, someone who understands what it means to protect a child at all costs. His eyes held hers. I think that someone is you. Nico's hands moved against his father's chest, signing something Sarah could see clearly even from several feet away. Please stay. Please don't leave me alone again. Sarah looked at this small boy who reminded her so much of her own Ethan, vulnerable, scared, desperately needing someone to see him and hear him and keep him safe. She thought about the stack of overdue bills on her kitchen counter, the eviction notice she'd been pretending didn't exist, the fear that kept her awake every night wondering how long she could keep this precarious life from collapsing. And she thought about Tommy, her brother, and the promise she'd made to always use her knowledge to help someone who needed it. Okay, Sarah whispered. Okay, but my son comes first. If this doesn't work, if Ethan isn't safe and happy, then I walk away, no matter how much you pay me. Something like… Approval flickered across Dante's face. Agreed. Your son comes first, just like mine. As Sarah grabbed her purse from behind the counter, ignoring Rita's shocked stare and the whispered conversation between the remaining customers, she caught sight of her reflection in the diner's window. She looked terrified and exhausted and desperate. She looked like someone who was about to make either the best or worst decision of her entire life. Outside, a black SUV waited at the curb, so clean it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 2 more bodyguards flanked the vehicle, their eyes constantly scanning the street for threats. Where's your babysitter? Dante asked as he settled Nico into the back seat. The boy immediately reached for Sarah's hand as she climbed in beside him. Pilsen neighborhood, Garcia Street. Sarah gave the address, her heart pounding as the SUV pulled smoothly into traffic. She's expecting me to pick up Ethan by midnight. We'll be there in 20 minutes, Dante assured her from the front passenger seat. He glanced back at her, and something in his expression made Sarah's breath catch. Thank you. For seeing my son. For speaking up when no one else would. I just did what anyone would do, Sarah said quietly. No. Dante's voice was firm. Most people would have looked away, would have minded their own business, would have decided that protecting themselves was more important than protecting a child. He paused. You're not most people, Sarah Chen. As the SUV navigated through Chicago's nighttime streets, Sarah held Nico's small hand in hers and wondered what kind of world she was entering. A world where men were beaten and dragged away, where wealth and power were displayed as casually as breathing, where danger lurked in every shadow, but also a world where a father would do anything to protect his son, where justice, violent as it might be, was swift and absolute, where maybe, just maybe, she and Ethan could finally stop running and start living. Nico's head drooped against her shoulder, exhaustion finally overtaking him. Sarah stroked his dark curls gently and signed with her free hand, even though his eyes were closed and he couldn't see. "You're safe now. I promise. No one will hurt you ever again." In the front seat, Dante watched them in the rearview mirror, and Sarah could have sworn she saw something like wonder in his eyes. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. "Garcia, everything okay? Ethan keeps asking when you're coming." Sarah typed back with one hand. "On my way. I have a surprise. Everything's about to change." She just hoped it would be a change for the better. Mrs. Garcia's tiny apartment smelled like cinnamon and coffee, a comforting contrast to the leather and gun oil scent of the SUV. When Sarah knocked, she heard her son's voice before the door even opened, high and excited, talking a mile a minute about the truck he'd built with blocks. The door swung open, revealing Mrs. Garcia's weathered face, creased with concern. Her eyes widened when she saw the suited men flanking Sarah, the expensive vehicle idling at the curb with its engine purring like a predator. "Mama!" Ethan launched himself at Sarah's legs, his small arms wrapping around her knees. He was wearing his dinosaur pajamas, his sandy brown hair sticking up in a dozen different directions. "Mrs. G said you'd be late, but I waited up because I wanted to show you my tower. It's the biggest one I ever made, and..." He stopped mid-sentence, finally noticing the strangers. His green eyes, so much like his father's, though Sarah tried not to think about that, went wide as he pressed closer to her legs. "It's okay, baby," Sarah said, running her fingers through his hair. "These are friends. We're going somewhere safe tonight." "Miss Chen, Mrs. Garcia said quietly, her English heavily accented. "Is everything okay? These men, they look like..." "We're friends of Miss Chen," Dante said smoothly, stepping forward but keeping enough distance not to intimidate. "She's done us a great service tonight. We're ensuring she and her son are properly protected." "Mrs. Garcia's eyes narrowed with the suspicion of someone who'd seen too much and trusted too little. But after a moment, she nodded slowly. "You take care of them," she said, looking directly at Dante. "They are good people. They deserve good things. They'll have the best of everything," Dante promised, and something in his tone made it sound like a vow rather than a simple assurance. Sarah gathered Ethan's few belongings, his worn backpack, his favorite stuffed elephant, the second-hand coat that was already getting too small. As she worked, she felt the weight of what she was doing settle over her shoulders. She was taking her son into the home of a man she'd met an hour ago, a dangerous man. A man who'd beaten his own brother unconscious without hesitation, but also a man who loved his son enough to destroy anyone who hurt him. A man who'd seen her, worth in minutes, when the rest of the world had been overlooking her for years. "Mama, who's that?" Ethan whispered, pointing at Nico, who stood half-hidden behind his father in the hallway. Sarah knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with her son. "That's Nico. He's 5, just like you, and he's going to be your friend. Does he like dinosaurs?" Ethan asked, the most important question in his young universe. Sarah glanced at Dante, who signed the question to Nico. The boy's face lit up with the first real smile Sarah had seen from him. He nodded enthusiastically and signed back. "He says dinosaurs are the best," Dante translated, "especially velociraptors." "Me too." Ethan's face broke into a huge grin. "Mama, can Nico see my tower? I made it really tall. Maybe tomorrow, baby." It's very late now. The ride to Dante's home took 40 minutes, leaving the familiar streets of Pilsen behind and heading into neighborhoods Sarah had only seen in magazines. The houses grew larger, the lawns more manicured, the security gates more imposing. By the time they pulled through a set of iron gates that looked like they belonged to a fortress, Sarah's hands were trembling. The mansion loomed before them, all stone and glass and architectural intimidation. Lights blazed from dozens of windows, and Sarah could see figures moving inside staff, she realized. Security. This wasn't just a home, it was a compound. "Holy cow," Ethan breathed, his nose pressed against the window. "Is this a castle?" "Something like that," Dante said, and Sarah caught the hint of amusement in his voice. "You can explore tomorrow. Tonight, you both need sleep." A woman in her 50s met them at the front door, her steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her expression carved from disapproval. "Mr. Moretti, we weren't expecting guests. Mrs. Castellano, this is Sarah Chen and her son Ethan. They'll be staying in the East Wing. guest suite with the connecting rooms. Mrs. Castellano's gaze swept over Sarah's worn jeans and second-hand coat, lingering on Ethan's patched pajamas. I see. Shall I prepare the rooms? Or will you be wanting something more, temporary? The emphasis on the last word was subtle but clear. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks, but before she could respond, Dante stepped forward. The guest suite, he said coolly. And Mrs. Castellano? Miss Chen is not temporary. She's family now. You'll treat her and her son with the same respect you show me. Am I clear? The housekeeper's lips pressed into a thin line. Crystal, sir. As Mrs. Castellano led them through hallways that seemed to stretch for miles, Sarah tried to process the grandeur around her. Marble floors that reflected chandelier light like still water. Oil paintings in heavy gold frames, each probably worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Ethan's hand tightened in hers, and she realized he was overwhelmed too. This was so far beyond the world of thrift stores and dollar menus, that it felt like stepping onto another planet. The guest suite made Sarah's entire apartment look like a closet. 2 bedrooms connected by a shared sitting room, each bedroom larger than any space Sarah had ever called her own. The furniture was elegant without being ostentatious. The colors soft blues and creams that felt like being wrapped in a cloud. The boy can sleep in the smaller room, Mrs. Castellano said, gesturing to one bedroom. You'll take the master. Kitchen is on the first floor, but meals are served at set times. Breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 6. Mr. Moretti doesn't tolerate lateness. We'll find our way, Sarah said quietly, exhaustion finally catching up with her. It was nearly 1 in the morning, and Ethan was already drooping against her side. After Mrs. Castellano left with one final disapproving sniff, Sarah helped Ethan into the smaller bedroom. The bed was enormous, with sheets that felt like silk beneath her fingers. Mama, is this real? Ethan asked as she tucked him in. Are we really staying here? For tonight, definitely. Maybe longer. Sarah kissed his forehead. Is that okay with you? Will Nico be here? Yes, baby. Nico lives here. Then it's okay. Ethan's eyes were already closing. I like Nico. He's quiet, but his eyes are nice. Like he understands things. Sarah's throat tightened. 5 years old, and her son was already reading people, looking for kindness in eyes rather than words. What kind of childhood had she given him that he'd learned to do that? She was sitting on the edge of her own bed, still fully dressed and trying to process everything that had happened in the last 3 hours, when a soft knock came at the sitting room door. Dante stood in the hallway, Nico asleep in his arms. He'd changed into dark jeans and a black t-shirt, looking more human and somehow more dangerous without the armor of his expensive suit. I wanted to check on you, he said, quietly. Make sure you had everything you needed. It's too much, Sarah whispered, gesturing at the opulent rooms. All of this. I don't know how to breathe, Dante said gently. That's all you need to do tonight. Breathe, sleep, and know that you're safe here. Both of you. Why? The question burst out before Sarah could stop it. Why are you doing this? I'm nobody. A waitress who happened to know sign language. You could hire a proper tutor, someone with credentials and experience. My son trusts you. Dante interrupted, and the raw emotion in his voice stopped her mid-sentence. Do you understand how rare that is? How precious? He looked down at Nico's sleeping face. I've thrown money at this problem for 2 years. The best child psychologists in the country, speech therapists, behavioral specialists. None of them could reach him. He met Sarah's eyes, and she saw the vulnerability there, the fear of a father who'd been failing his child and knew it. You reached him. In 5 minutes, Sarah. You saw him when everyone else just saw a problem to solve. That's not something I can hire. That's something I need to protect. I'm not some savior, Sarah said, her voice cracking. I'm just someone who lost her brother and promised to never forget him. That's all. That's everything, Dante corrected. He paused, then asked, Your son's father. Is he in the picture? Sarah's jaw tightened. No. He made it clear he wanted nothing to do with us the minute I told him I was pregnant. I haven't seen him since Ethan was born. His loss, Dante said firmly. Ethan is remarkable. You don't even know him. I know he was brave enough to walk into a stranger's home without hesitation. I know he saw my son, and immediately asked about friendship, rather than being scared or curious about why Nico doesn't speak. That tells me everything I need to know about how you've raised him. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Compliments about her parenting were rare. Most people saw a struggling single mom and assumed failure, incompetence, poor choices. Having someone acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, she was doing something right, felt like water in a desert. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Get some sleep, Dante said softly. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what comes next. But tonight, just rest. You've earned it. After he left, Sarah finally changed into one of the silk nightgowns she found in the dresser, brand new, tags still on, in exactly her size. Someone had prepared these rooms with care, had anticipated her needs before she even knew she'd be here. The thought should have been comforting. Instead, it made her wonder exactly how much Dante Moretti knew about her, and how long he'd been watching before tonight. Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize and panic flooding her system before memory caught up. The mansion, Dante, Nico signing, "Help me" in that booth. She checked her phone. 6:45. Ethan would be waking soon, and she had no idea what the protocol was in a house like this. Did she wake him? Let him sleep? Were there rules about children running through the halls? The decision was made for her when she heard high-pitched giggling from the sitting room. She threw on a robe and rushed out to find Ethan and Nico sitting on the floor, building something elaborate with blocks that definitely hadn't been there last night. "Mama, look." Ethan pointed excitedly. "Nico and me are making a dinosaur fortress. His papa brought us blocks and everything." Nico looked up at her with shy excitement, signing, "Good morning. Is it okay we're playing?" "Of course it's okay," Sarah signed back, her heart melting at the sight of the two boys already forming a bond. "Where did the blocks come from?" Nico pointed to the blocks. "Hallway," where Sarah noticed two bodyguards standing at attention. One of them, Marco, she remembered, gave her a slight nod. "Mr. Moretti had them delivered an hour ago, miss," Marco said. "Along with breakfast. It's waiting in your sitting room whenever you're ready." Sarah pulled on clothes, jeans, and a sweater from her own belongings, refusing to wear the expensive items she'd found in the closet, and investigated the sitting room. A rolling cart held enough food to feed 6 people. Fresh fruit, pastries, scrambled eggs, bacon, juice, coffee. A note in bold, masculine handwriting sat on top. "Let the boys play. Join me in my office when you're ready. 2nd floor, West Wing. Marco will show you the way." Sarah ate mechanically, watching through the doorway as Ethan and Nico communicated through a combination of gestures, signs, and Ethan's constant chatter. They understood each other perfectly, despite the language barrier, the way only children could. "Miss Chen," Marco, appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Moretti is ready for you whenever you'd like. The boys will be perfectly safe. Tony and Luca will stay with them. They both have first aid training and experience with children." Sarah looked at her son, who was now making explosion sounds, as a plastic T-Rex attacked their block fortress. He looked happy. Safe. More carefree than she'd seen him in months. "Ethan, honey? Mama needs to talk to Mr. Moretti for a little while. You stay here with Nico and these nice men, okay?" "Okay, Mama. Can we have more juice?" "Of course, young sir," Tony said with unexpected gentleness. "Whatever you need." Dante's office was nothing like Sarah expected. She'd imagined something dark and intimidating, all leather and mahogany and implicit threats. Instead, it was bright and airy, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking elaborate gardens. The furniture was modern and comfortable, and one entire wall was covered with photographs mostly of Nico at various ages, but also what looked like extended family members. Dante sat behind a large desk, reviewing documents, still in casual clothes that made him look younger and somehow more dangerous. When Sarah entered, he stood immediately. "Good morning. Did you sleep?" "Some." Sarah remained standing, her hands clasped in front of her. "We need to talk about expectations. If I'm staying here, even temporarily, I need to know what you want from me. Directly to business." "I can respect that." Dante gestured to a chair, and after a moment, Sarah sat. "What I want is simple. Help my son communicate. Help him process what happened with Vincent. Help him feel safe enough to start healing. I'm not a therapist, I have no formal training in childhood trauma or— I don't want a therapist, Dante interrupted. I've had a dozen therapists. They come in with their clipboards and their theories, and Nico shuts down completely. With you, he opens up. That's what I need. Sarah took a deep breath. Okay, but I have conditions. Dante's eyebrow raised slightly. Go on. First, Ethan comes first. Always. If anything about this situation puts him at risk or makes him unhappy, I walk away. No arguments. Agreed. Second, I need to know what I'm walking into. You said you're in business. I'm not stupid, Mr. Moretti. I saw how people reacted to you at the diner. I saw what you did to your brother. I need to know exactly what kind of world I'm bringing my son into. Dante was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he stood and walked to the windows, his back to her. My family has been in Chicago for 4 generations, he said quietly. We started as immigrants who did what we had to do to survive. Over time, that survival turned into prosperity, into power, into— He paused. Territory. You're in the Mafia, Sarah said flatly. That's a crude term, but yes. Organized crime, if you prefer clinical language. He turned to face her. I run legitimate businesses, restaurants, construction, real estate. But those businesses have roots in less legitimate ventures. Protection. Gambling. I don't deal in drugs or human trafficking. I have lines I don't cross. But I'm not a good man, Sarah. I've hurt people, killed people, done things that would horrify you. Sarah's heart was pounding, but she forced herself to stay calm. And Vincent is currently learning what happens when you betray family. Dante's voice went cold. He won't be walking freely for a very long time, if ever. What he did to Nico, his hands clenched. There are some sins that can't be forgiven. What did he do? Sarah asked quietly. Nico tried to tell me at the diner, but we were interrupted. Dante moved back to his desk and pulled out a tablet, turning it so Sarah could see. Security footage showed a room she didn't recognize, sparse, institutional, with a small bed and a desk. Nico sat at the desk, working on what looked like homework. Vincent entered the frame. At first, his interactions with Nico seemed normal, checking his work, pointing things out, but then the pointing became prodding. The words Sarah couldn't hear became aggressive, based on Vincent's body language. When Nico made a mistake, Vincent grabbed him by the hair and slammed his face into the desk. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. The footage continued. Vincent's training sessions escalated over multiple clips, shoving Nico into walls, locking him in closets, forcing him to stand for hours without moving, all while the boy remained completely silent, never crying out, never making a sound that might alert anyone. I travel for business, Dante said, his voice rough with emotion. Meetings in New York, Miami, Vegas. Vincent was Nico's primary caretaker when I was gone. His uncle. Someone I trusted absolutely. He paused. I asked Nico 1,000 times if everything was okay. He never told me. Never indicated anything was wrong. Because Vincent told him you wouldn't believe. To him, Sarah said, understanding washing over her. Or that you'd be angry. Or that it would get worse if he told. It's what abusers do, isolate their victims, make them believe no one will help. You know now, she said firmly, and you're fixing it. That's what matters. Dante met her eyes, and Sarah saw gratitude there. My third condition, she continued, is that you tell me if there's danger, if someone is threatening us, if we need to be more careful. I can't protect Ethan if I don't know what we're facing. Vincent's allies might retaliate, Dante admitted. He had his own crew, his own interests. Some of them won't take kindly to him being removed from power. And they know about me? By now? Yes. Word travels fast in our world. The waitress who got Vincent arrested is probably already a topic of conversation. Fear skittered down Sarah's spine, but she forced it aside. She'd been afraid before. Afraid of her ex when she'd told him about the pregnancy. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of failing her son. Fear was an old companion, and she'd learned to function despite it. Then we'll be careful, she said. But I won't hide Ethan away. He needs normalcy, friends, experiences. Nico does too. Agreed. But they'll have security. Always. I can live with that. Sarah paused. One more thing. I need to know why. Why help us so much? It's not just about Nico communicating. You could hire someone to teach him sign language, set up sessions, whatever. Why bring us into your home? Why give Ethan blocks and breakfast in security? Dante was quiet for so long Sarah thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because when I look at you and Ethan, I see what Nico and I could have been if life had been different. A mother who fights for her child. A boy who's loved and secure despite having so little. He met her eyes. Nico's mother died when he was 3. Car accident. When she died, I lost my way. Became harder, colder. Focused on business and power instead of the little boy who needed his father. He moved closer, and Sarah could see the pain etched into every line of his face. Vincent exploited that. And now I have a second chance to give Nico someone who truly sees him. The way you do. Someone who understands that silence doesn't mean empty. That different doesn't mean broken. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was rough with emotion. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, that someone can teach me how to be the father I should have been all along. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. This man, dangerous, powerful, violent, was just a father drowning in guilt and desperate for redemption. She understood that. She'd been drowning herself for 5 years, trying to give Ethan everything he needed while barely keeping her own head above water. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. We'll stay. And we'll help Nico together. And I'll help you, Dante said firmly. Whatever you need, housing, security, education for Ethan, anything, it's yours. You're not just an employee, Sarah. You're family now. That means something in my world. Before Sarah could respond, Marco appeared in the doorway, his expression urgent. Boss, we have a situation. Someone's trying to breach the south perimeter. Could be Vincent's people making a move. Dante's entire demeanor shifted in an instant, the vulnerable father disappearing behind the mask of the dangerous mob boss. Lock down the house. Get Tony to move the boys to the safe room. Sarah, I'm coming with you to the boys, Sarah said, already on her feet. Absolutely not. If this turns into a firefight, then I need to be with my son. Sarah's voice was steel. Don't ask me to hide while Ethan might be scared. I won't do it. For a moment, their eyes locked in a battle of wills. Then Dante nodded sharply. Stay close to me. Do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. As they rushed through, in the mansion's hallways, alarms began to blare, and Sarah saw suited men appearing from every direction, weapons drawn, moving with military precision. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress under attack, and somewhere inside it were 2 5-year-old boys who'd just started to feel safe. Sarah ran faster, her only thought getting to Ethan before whatever was coming reached them first. The safe room was hidden behind a bookshelf in the library that swung open like something from a spy movie. Sarah burst through to find Ethan, and Nico huddled together on a plush sofa, their dinosaur fortress abandoned. Tony stood guard at the entrance, weapon drawn, his earlier gentleness replaced by lethal focus. Mama! Ethan launched himself at her, and Sarah caught him, holding him tight against her chest. It's okay, baby. Everything's okay. But Nico's eyes locked on his father with terrified understanding told a different story. This boy had lived through danger before. He knew what the back alarms meant, what the weapons meant, what the tension radiating from every adult meant. Dante crossed to his son and knelt down, signing with rapid precision. Stay with Sarah. She'll keep you safe. I'll fix this. Don't go. Nico signed back, his small hands trembling. What if you don't come back? What if they hurt you like they hurt Mama? The question hit Dante like a physical blow. Sarah watched his mask crack, watched the guilt and love and fear wash across his face before he pulled his son into a fierce embrace. I always come back, Dante signed against Nico's hair. Always. That's a promise. Marco appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Boss, false alarm. Security patrol caught a reporter trying to climb the south fence. He's been removed and warned. No other threats detected. The tension drained from the room like water from a broken dam. Dante's shoulders sagged with relief, and Sarah realized she'd been holding her breath. A reporter? She asked. Vincent's. Arrest made the news, Marco explained. Prominent businessman accused of child abuse. Media vultures are circling. This one probably thought he'd get exclusive photos of the family compound. Dante stood, his expression hardening. Double the perimeter security. No one gets within 100 yards of this property without full background checks. And Marco? Find out which outlet he works for. I want to have a conversation with his editor. On it, boss. After Marco left, Dante turned to Sarah and the boys. I'm sorry. You shouldn't have to live like this, alarms and lockdowns and constant vigilance. But we do have to live like this, Sarah said quietly, still holding Ethan. Don't we? This is your world, our world now. I can arrange for you to stay somewhere else. A safe house with full security but more privacy, less... No. Sarah surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. Nico needs consistency. He needs to know we're not leaving him again. Right, buddy? She signed. The last part to Nico, who nodded emphatically and signed back. Please don't go. You and Ethan make it better here. Ethan, who'd been watching the signed conversation with wide eyes, tugged on Sarah's sleeve. Mama, can you teach me that? The hand talking? So I can talk to Nico better? Sarah's throat tightened. You want to learn sign language? Yeah. Then Nico and me can tell secrets, and nobody else will know. Ethan's face brightened with 5-year-old logic. And if bad guys come, we can talk without making noise, like spies. Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling. Leave it to a child to find the adventure in trauma. I think that's a wonderful idea, Dante said, and when he looked at Sarah, she saw something new in his eyes. Not just gratitude or respect, but something deeper, warmer, something that made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The next 2 weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm. Mornings were for lessons Sarah taught both boys, a sign language, starting with basics and gradually building their vocabulary. Ethan picked it up with the fearless enthusiasm of childhood, making mistakes and laughing at himself and trying again. Nico bloomed under his new friend's attention, his signing becoming more confident, more expressive. But it was the afternoons that surprised Sarah. Dante, despite running what was essentially a criminal empire, made time every day to join their lessons. He'd sit on the floor with the boys, his expensive clothes forgotten, practicing signs with the same intense focus he probably brought to business negotiations. No, Papa. Like this. Nico would sign, patiently correcting his father's hand positions. And Dante would try again, and again, until he got it right. Sarah watched these interactions with growing confusion. This wasn't the cold mob boss from the diner. This was a father desperately trying to connect with his son, to make up for years of missed opportunities and misplaced trust. One afternoon, she found Dante in his office, reviewing what looked like construction plans. He glanced up when she knocked, and his expression softened immediately. Is everything all right? Fine. The boys are napping. I wanted to ask you something. Anything. Sarah closed the door and settled into the chair across from his desk. Why are you really doing this? The lessons, the time with the boys, all of it. You're one of the most powerful men in Chicago. You could hire an army of tutors and nannies and never see Nico except at dinner. But you're there every day, trying so hard to... She paused, searching for the right words. To be better. Dante set down his pen and was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. When my wife Maria died, I thought the answer to grief was control. Control every aspect of my business, my territory, my life. I convinced myself that if I was strong enough, powerful enough, I could prevent any more loss. He looked out the window at the gardens where security men patrolled, but control is an illusion. I controlled everything except what mattered most, my relationship with my son. He turned back to Sarah, and she saw raw vulnerability in his eyes. Vincent's abuse happened because I was too busy controlling things that didn't matter. I missed my son's pain because I was too focused on power. And when you walked into that diner and saw what I'd been blind to for months, his voice cracked. You showed me that all my control, all my power, meant nothing if I couldn't protect the one person who mattered most. You're protecting him now, Sarah said softly. No, we're protecting him now. Dante leaned forward, his intensity making her breath catch. You and Ethan, you've given Nico something I couldn't, a family that sees him, that accepts him exactly as he is. Do you know what he signed to me last night? Sarah shook her head. He said, I wish Sarah was my mama, and Ethan was my wanted. Brother for real, not just pretend. And I realized I wished the same thing. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to unpack. Her heart was racing, palms sweating. every instinct screaming warnings about getting too close, too attached, too hopeful. Dante, a knock interrupted whatever she'd been about to say. Marco entered without waiting for permission, his face grim. Boss, we've got a problem. Vincent's crew is making noise. They're claiming you had him arrested on false charges, that the boy lied about the abuse. They're pushing the other families to question your leadership. Dante's expression went cold. Let them push. The security footage doesn't lie. They're saying the footage was doctored, that you fabricated evidence to eliminate a rival. Marco glanced at Sarah. And they're saying the waitress, Miss Chen is in on it. That she's some kind of plant you brought in to give the story credibility. Sarah, I felt ice flood her veins. They're coming after me? They're coming after your reputation. Dante corrected, but his tone was sharp with worry. Trying to discredit you so the abuse claims fall apart. If they succeed, they can paint Vincent as a victim and me as a tyrant who destroys anyone who threatens my power. But the footage can be explained away if they undermine you as a witness. Dante stood, pacing like a caged predator. We need to get ahead of this. Marco, call a family meeting. Every captain, every lieutenant. They need to hear the truth directly from me. And Miss Chen? Marco asked carefully. She comes with me. Dante's tone left no room for argument. If Vincent's people want to question her credibility, they can do it to her face. Let them look at a woman who has nothing to gain from lying and see if they still believe their story. Absolutely not, Sarah said, standing. I'm not walking into a room full of criminals and what? Dante's eyes flashed. Let them destroy your reputation from a distance? Let them paint you as a liar without ever giving you a chance to defend yourself? He moved closer, and Sarah could feel the intensity radiating from him. I won't let them do that to you, Sarah. You saved my son. The least I can do is let you defend yourself with the truth. What about Ethan? I can't leave him here if he'll be safe. I'll have my most trusted men guarding him and Nico. Dante's expression softened slightly. I swear on my life, nothing will happen to those boys while we're gone. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, wanted to grab Ethan and run back to their old life where danger was just overdue bills and broken plumbing. But she'd crossed into this world willingly. She'd seen Nico's terror and chosen to help. She couldn't back down now just because things were getting complicated. Fine, she whispered. But if anything happens to my son, it won't, Dante promised. I'd burn the city to ash before I let anyone hurt either of those boys. The meeting was held in a warehouse on the south side, neutral territory that belonged to none of the families but was respected by all. Sarah rode in silence beside Dante, watching Chicago's neighborhoods blur past the tinted windows. She'd changed into one of the dresses from the closet, simple black, elegant without being showy, and let Mrs. Castellano do something with her hair that made her look older, more credible. She felt like she was dressing for her own funeral. You don't have to do this, Dante said quietly as they pulled up to the warehouse. Say the word and we turn around. I'll handle this another way. Sarah looked at him, this dangerous man who'd somehow become her protector, her employer, her... What? Friend seemed too simple. Ally too cold. Something else that she didn't have words for yet. I'm not running, she said firmly. Nico told me the truth because he trusted me. I won't let Vincent's people twist that into something ugly. Dante's hand found hers, his grip warm and solid. You're remarkable. You know that? Before Sarah could respond, Marco opened her door. The warehouse loomed before them, industrial and intimidating, with men in dark suits flanking every entrance. This was a world so far from her experience it felt surreal, like playing a role in a movie about someone else's life. Inside, the warehouse had been transformed into a makeshift conference room. A long table dominated the center, surrounded by at least 30 men in various stages of expensive dress. The air was thick with cigar smoke and tension. Every conversation stopped when Sarah entered on Dante's arm. 30 pairs of eyes turned to assess her, to judge her, to decide if she was a liar or a pawn or something genuine. Sarah lifted her chin and met their stares, refusing to be intimidated. Gentlemen, Dante said, his voice carrying easily through the cavernous space. Thank you for coming on short notice. We have 2 matters to discuss regarding recent events in my organization. An older man at the far end of the table, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, spoke up. You mean the arrest of Vincent Moretti on child abuse charges? Charges that conveniently removed your biggest rival for leadership. Vincent was my brother, Dante said coldly. Not my rival. And the charges are not convenient, they're true. So you say, another man, younger and clearly hostile, leaned forward. But the only witness is this woman, a nobody waitress who showed up out of nowhere just in time to accuse Vincent. Forgive us if we're skeptical. Her name is Sarah Chen, Dante said, and something in his tone made several men shift uncomfortably. And she's here to speak for herself. You want to question her credibility? Do it to her face. Sarah felt Dante's hand at the small of her back, a subtle pressure of support as he guided her forward. She'd never felt more exposed in her life. Standing before these men who probably killed people before breakfast and thought nothing of it. I don't expect you to believe me based on my word alone, Sarah said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. I'm just a waitress. I have no reason to lie, but I also have no credentials, no reputation in your world. So let me tell you what I saw, and you can judge for yourselves. She recounted the night at the diner, Nico's desperate signing, his terror when Vincent arrived, and the way he'd said, "It's him," over and over. She described the security footage Dante had shown her, the systematic abuse, the isolation and fear. I have a 5-year-old son, Sarah continued, and her voice finally cracked with emotion. I know what it looks like when a child is scared, when they're hurting, when they're too afraid to ask for help because they think no one will believe them. Nico had that look. That's not something you can fake. That's not something I would lie about for any amount of money or protection. The silver-haired man studied her with unreadable eyes. And what do you gain from this accusation, Miss Chen? A job? A place in Dante's organization? I gain a clear conscience, Sarah said simply. I couldn't save my own brother from the car accident that killed him, but I could help a little boy who was being hurt. That's all I did. That's all I'm doing now. Silence stretched through the warehouse. Sarah could feel sweat trickling down her spine, could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Then the silver-haired man nodded slowly. I believe her, he said. Anyone who's spent 5 minutes with Vincent knows he has a cruel streak. And I've seen how Dante dotes on that boy. He wouldn't manufacture charges that could destroy his family's reputation unless they were true. Other men began nodding, murmuring agreement. The hostile younger man still looked skeptical, but even he seemed less certain now. Vincent's crew will still cause trouble, Marco said from beside Dante. They're loyal to him, not to reason. Then we deal with them, Dante said coldly. Anyone who stands with Vincent after seeing the evidence stands against this family. Make that clear to everyone. As the meeting continued with discussions of territory and business, Sarah didn't understand. She felt exhaustion crash over her like a wave. She'd defended herself to a room full of criminals, and somehow survived. She'd stood up for Nico in a way his own father couldn't, because she came from outside this world, because she had nothing to lose except her integrity. When they finally left the warehouse hours later, night had fallen over Chicago. Sarah sagged against the SUV's leather seats, her adrenaline finally depleting. You were incredible in there, Dante said quietly. The way you spoke, the way you stood up to them. I was terrified, Sarah admitted. I know. That's what made it brave. Dante's hand found hers in the darkness of the back seat. Most people in that room have forgotten what it means to stand up for something without calculating the benefit first. You reminded them. Sarah looked at their joined hands, at how natural it felt despite everything. What happens now? Now Vincent's allies either fall in line or face consequences. Now my organization knows that I value truth over convenience, people over power. He paused. And now I take you and the boys somewhere safe while we let things settle. Safe where? I have a property upstate. Private, secure, far from the politics and posturing of Chicago. We can spend a few weeks there, let Nico and Ethan just be kids for a while. Let you breathe without looking over your shoulder. It sounded like heaven. Sarah wanted to say yes immediately. Wanted to escape to some imaginary place where 5-year-olds could play without bodyguards, and single mothers could sleep without fear. But she'd learned that heaven always came with a price. What's the catch? Dante's smile was sad. The catch is that eventually we have to come back. Eventually, we have to face whatever Vincent's people are planning. But for now, for a few weeks at least, we can pretend we're just a family on vacation. A family. The word settled around Sarah's heart like a warm blanket and a lead weight all at once. When had she started thinking of them that way? When had Dante and Nico stopped being the dangerous strangers from the diner and become something more? Okay, she whispered. Let's go be a family. The property upstate was nothing like the Fortress mansion in Chicago. It was a sprawling lake house, all windows and natural wood, surrounded by forests that seemed to stretch forever. The closest neighbor was 5 miles away. The only sounds were birds and wind through trees and the gentle lap of water against the dock. Paradise. For 3 weeks, they lived in a bubble of normalcy that Sarah knew couldn't last but cherished anyway. She taught the boys to fish off the dock, laughing as Ethan squealed when he caught his first bass. Dante grilled dinner every night, surprisingly domestic in jeans and a t-shirt, his dangerous edge softened by domesticity. Nico spoke his first words since his mother's death on their 10th day at the lake house. They were sitting around the fire pit after dinner, roasting marshmallows and watching stars emerge. Ethan was in the middle of an elaborate story about a dinosaur who learned to swim, complete with hand gestures and sound effects. Nico watched with rapt attention, signing questions and comments. Then Ethan's marshmallow caught fire, and without thinking, Nico shouted, "Ethan, blow it out!" The words were rusty, slightly slurred from disuse, but unmistakably clear. Everyone froze. Ethan's mouth fell open. Sarah's eyes flooded with tears. And Dante looked at his son like he'd just witnessed a miracle. "You talked," Ethan breathed. "Nico, you talked with your voice." Nico's hands flew to his mouth, eyes wide with shock at what he'd done. For a moment, Sarah, worried he might retreat back into silence. But then Dante was there, pulling his son into his arms, and Nico whispered against his father's shoulder, "I forgot I couldn't. I just wanted to help Ethan." "You can," Dante said, his voice thick with emotion. "You can always talk, Piccolo, whenever you want, however you want, sign language or spoken words or both you choose. You're perfect either way." That night, after the boys were asleep, Sarah found Dante on the dock, staring out at the moonlit water. "You did that," he said when she sat beside him. "You gave my son his voice back." "He was always there," Sarah said gently. "He just needed to feel safe enough to emerge. Needed something worth speaking for." "Ethan," Dante said with a small smile. "He spoke because he wanted to help his friend." "Best friends," Sarah corrected. "That's what they call each other now, in sign language and out loud." They sat in comfortable silence, shoulders touching, listening to the lake's gentle sounds. Sarah had never felt so at peace in her entire life. No bills to worry about, no fear of eviction, no wondering how she'd feed her son tomorrow. Just this moment, this place, this man beside her who somehow made her feel both terrified and safe all at once. "Sarah," Dante said quietly, "when we go back to Chicago, things will be different, more complicated. Vincent's trial is starting in 2 weeks, and you'll likely be called to testify. His people will make another push to discredit you, to protect him. I know, it could get dangerous, not just politics and posturing, but actual violence. They might come after you to keep you from testifying." Sarah's peace shattered like glass. She'd known this bubble couldn't last, but hearing it stated so plainly made reality crash back in. "Then we prepare," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "We make sure Ethan and Nico are protected. We tell the truth. Sarah," Dante said quietly, "when we go back to Chicago, things will be different, more complicated. Vincent's trial is starting in 2 weeks, and you'll likely be called to testify. His people will make another push to discredit you, to protect him. I know. It could get dangerous. Not just politics and posturing, but actual violence. Then we prepare," Sarah said. "We protect the boys and tell the truth. I want you to stay," Dante said quietly. "I want you with us through all of it. I want to wake up every morning and see you teaching the boys. I want to have dinner together and put them to bed together and pretend we're a normal family even though nothing about this is normal." He turned to face her fully. "But I can't be selfish. I can't ask you to risk your life and Ethan's future just because I—" He stopped abruptly, and Sarah's heart was suddenly hammering. "Because you what?" Dante's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with aching gentleness. "Because I'm falling in love with you, Sarah Chen. And love makes people do stupid, dangerous things." Sarah couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Could only stare at this man who'd turned her world upside down in the span of a month. who'd given her safety and security, and something she was terrified to name. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know, so am I. The last man I loved abandoned me the second things got difficult. Left me pregnant and alone and—" "I'm not him," Dante said fiercely. "I would never." "I know." Sarah placed her hand over his, still cupping her face. "That's what scares me. Because if I let myself love you back, if I let Ethan get attached to you and Nico, if I let myself believe this could work—" Her voice cracked. "And then something happens to you. If Vincent's people succeed, if you get hurt or killed or taken away, then you'll survive," Dante said firmly. "Because you're the strongest person I've ever met. You've already survived abandonment and poverty and single parenthood. You'd survive losing me, too, if it came to that." "But I don't want to," Sarah realized, the truth of it washing over her. "I don't want to survive without you anymore. I want to live with you. I want Ethan and Nico to grow up as brothers. I want to wake up next to you and teach sign language together, and have family dinners and—" Dante kissed her. It was soft and desperate and full of promises that terrified Sarah, even as they made her heart soar. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante pressed his forehead to hers. "Then stay," he whispered. "Stay and testify and help me finish this. And when it's over, when Vincent is locked away and his people are dealt with, stay again. Stay forever. Be my partner in everything, raising these boys, building a life, facing whatever comes next." "You're asking me to marry you," Sarah breathed. "Eventually, yes. But for now, I'm asking you to choose us. Choose this family we're building. Choose the messy, complicated, dangerous life we could have together over the safe, lonely life you could have apart from us." Sarah thought about the past month, the laughter and lessons, the quiet moments and chaos, the way Ethan had bloomed with a friend, and Nico had found his voice again. She thought about the future stretching before them, uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. "Okay," she said. "I choose us. I choose this. I choose you." The smile that broke across Dante's face was like sunrise, warm and brilliant and full of hope. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring it, and Sarah let herself fall into the moment, into the feeling, into the terrifying beauty of choosing love over safety. Behind them, neither noticed the small figure watching from the house window. Nico stood in his pajamas, signing to himself with a smile that rivaled his father's. "Sarah is staying. She's going to be my mama for real. We're going to be a real family." But in Chicago, Vincent Moretti sat in his cell and planned his revenge. His lawyers had found a loophole, a technicality that might get the charges dismissed. And if that happened, if he walked free, the first thing he'd do was make sure Dante Moretti learned what it meant to lose everything he loved. The storm was coming. The only question was whether this fragile new family could survive it. 2 days before they were scheduled to return to Chicago, the threat arrived in the form of a phone call that made Dante's face go pale. Sarah was making lunch with the boys when she heard his voice from the study, sharp, angry, full of barely controlled fury. She left Ethan and Nico decorating sandwiches and followed the sound. Dante stood at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand clenched into a fist. "Say that again," he said quietly, and the softness of his voice was more frightening than shouting would have been. Sarah couldn't hear the response, but she saw Dante's expression darken further. "No, absolutely not. I don't care what loopholes I found Vincent doesn't walk free." A pause. "Then we appeal. Fight it. Use every resource we have." Another pause, longer this time. "What do you mean it's already decided?" Sarah's stomach dropped. She moved closer, and Dante looked up, his eyes meeting hers with something that looked like devastation. "I understand," he said into the phone. "Keep me updated." He hung up and set the phone down with exaggerated care, like he was trying not to throw it through the window. "What happened?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Vincent's lawyers found a procedural error in how evidence was collected. The judge threw out the security footage. Dante's voice was hollow. "Without that footage, they're saying there's insufficient evidence to hold him. He'll be released within 48 hours. The world tilted beneath Sarah's feet. "But my testimony isn't enough on its own. They're claiming Nico is too young to be a reliable witness, that his selective mutism makes his statements questionable. And your testimony is just hearsay, what Nico signed to you, not what you saw yourself." Dante moved around the desk and pulled Sarah into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. "I'm so sorry. I promised you'd be safe. I promised—" "It's not your fault," Sarah said against his chest, even though fear was clawing up her throat. "We knew this could happen. Vincent will come after us," Dante said. "After you specifically, for testifying against him. After Nico for telling the truth. He'll want revenge, and he'll be ruthless about it." "Then we fight," Sarah said, pulling back to look at him. "We protect the boys, we prepare, and we don't let him win." But even as she said the words, she wondered if bravery would be enough. Vincent had already proven he was willing to hurt children to get what he wanted. What would he do now that he was facing humiliation and loss of power? They returned to Chicago that night, cutting their vacation short to prepare for whatever was coming. The drive back felt like a funeral procession, everyone silent, the boys sensing the adults' fear even if they didn't understand its source. The mansion was already in lockdown when they arrived. Security had been tripled, every entrance monitored, guards positioned on every floor. Mrs. Castellano had prepared rooms for Sarah and Ethan closer to Dante's master suite, closer to protection, closer to the heart of the fortress. "I want them where I can reach them in seconds," Dante had explained. "If Vincent makes a move, I need to know they're safe." That first night back, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in the enormous bed, listening to Ethan's soft breathing from the adjoining room, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. A soft knock made her heart leap. She grabbed the robe from the chair and opened the door to find Dante in the hallway, looking as exhausted and sleepless as she felt. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. She shook her head. "And let him in," Sarah interrupted. She crossed to him and took his hands in hers. "I meant what I said. I choose this. I choose you and Nico and whatever comes with that. Running away doesn't keep us safe, Dante. It just means we're alone and vulnerable somewhere else. Or it means you're alive and free. Free from what? From the only family Ethan's ever really had? From the man I—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "The man you what?" Dante asked softly. Sarah took a shaky breath. "The man I love. Even though it's insane, and we've only known each other a month and you're a criminal and I'm a waitress and nothing about this makes sense, I love you. I love watching you with the boys. I love how you're trying so hard to be better. I love that you think protecting me means pushing me away when really, protecting me means holding me closer." Dante's eyes shone with emotion. He pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that felt like a promise and a prayer all at once. "Then we do this together," he murmured against her mouth. "We protect our boys. We face Vincent. And when this is over, we build the life we both deserve. Promise?" Sarah whispered. "I promise." Vincent was released on a Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, he'd vanished. He's not at his apartment, not at any of his usual haunts. Marco reported, his expression grim. "It's like he disappeared into thin air." "He's planning something," Dante said. They were in his office. Dante, Sarah, Marco, and 2 other senior members of Dante's organization. Vincent doesn't hide unless he's preparing a move. "We've got men watching everyone connected to him," Marco said. "Former crew members, associates, even his ex-girlfriends. If he reaches out to anyone, we'll know." But the days passed with no sign of Vincent, and the tension in the house grew thick enough to choke on. The boys sensed something was wrong despite everyone's efforts to act normal. Nico had nightmares every night, waking up crying for his father. Ethan started wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done in over a year. "They're scared," Sarah told Dante one evening after the boys had finally fallen asleep. "They don't understand what's happening, but they know we're afraid." "Maybe we should tell them something," Dante said. "Age appropriate, but honest. They're smart kids. They know we're hiding things." So the next morning, they sat the boys down and explained as gently as possible that Uncle Vincent might try to cause trouble, and that they needed to stay close to bodyguards and tell an adult immediately if they saw or heard anything strange. "Is Uncle Vincent coming back?" Nico signed, his face pale. "We won't let him hurt you." Dante signed firmly. "That's a promise." But promises, Sarah was learning, were easy to make and hard to keep in Dante's world. The attack came on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after Vincent's release. Sarah was in the garden with the boys, teaching them about different plants, while bodyguards watched from a discreet distance. It was a beautiful afternoon, sunny and warm, with flowers blooming and bees humming. Normal. Peaceful. The first indication something was wrong was the sound of a gunshot from inside the house. The bodyguards reacted instantly, weapons drawn, one of them, Tony, physically throwing himself in front of the boys, while another grabbed Sarah and shoved her toward the ground. "Stay down!" he shouted, as more gunfire erupted. Through the chaos, Sarah could hear screaming from inside the house, the crash of breaking glass, the shouted orders of men in combat. Her only thought was Ethan covering him with her body, trying to shield him from whatever horror was unfolding. "Mama!" Ethan was crying, his small hands clutching at her shirt. "What's happening?" Beside them, Nico had gone completely silent, his dark eyes wide with terror that reminded Sarah sickeningly of that first night at the diner. Tony was signing out to him, trying to keep him calm, but Nico had retreated somewhere inside himself where words couldn't reach. "We need to move them to the safe room," Tony said into his radio. "Now!" But before they could move, a figure appeared in the garden entrance. Vincent Moretti stood there with a gun in his hand, and a smile that made Sarah's blood freeze. "Hello, nephew," he said, his eyes locked on Nico. "Did you miss Uncle Vincent?" Tony's gun came up instantly, trained on Vincent's chest. "Don't move. Drop the weapon." Vincent's smile widened. Now, is that any way to greet family?" His eyes flicked to Sarah, still covering Ethan with her body. "And the famous waitress, the woman who destroyed my life with her lies." "They weren't lies," Sarah said, forcing her voice to stay steady, even though her heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. "You hurt Nico. You terrorized him for months." "I made him strong," Vincent corrected. "Or tried to. But then you came along with your soft words and your hand signals, convincing my brother that discipline was abuse, that weakness should be coddled instead of corrected." Behind them, Sarah could hear more gunfire from the house. Vincent hadn't come alone. This was a coordinated attack, timed perfectly to divide Dante's forces. "Where's Dante?" Vincent asked conversationally. "Inside dealing with my men? Trying to protect his precious fortress while his real treasures are out here, vulnerable?" Tony's finger tightened on the trigger. "I said drop the weapon." "You won't shoot me," Vincent said with absolute confidence. "Because the moment you do, my men inside kill everyone they find, including Mrs. Castellano and that lovely cook who makes Nico's favorite pasta. You really want their deaths on your conscience?" The standoff stretched for an eternal second. Sarah could feel Ethan trembling beneath her, could see Nico's face draining of all color as he stared at his uncle. Then Nico did something that changed everything. He stood up. "Nico, no." Sarah reached for him, but the boy stepped away from her protection, his small body rigid with determination. His hands moved in quick, sharp signs. "You don't scare me anymore." Vincent's expression flickered with surprise before settling back into cruel amusement. "Oh? Found your courage, did you? Or did the waitress teach you that too?" "She taught me that I'm not weak." Nico signed, and to Sarah's shock, he spoke the words aloud too, his voice clear despite the tremor running through his small frame. "She taught me that asking for help isn't wrong, that telling the truth about bad people is brave, not stupid." "Nico, please." Sarah tried to pull him back, but he shrugged off her hand. "You told me Papa would send me away if I told him what you did," Nico continued, his signing becoming more forceful. "You said no one would believe me, that I was worthless and broken and deserved to be hurt. And you proved me right," Vincent said coldly. "You told your father, and look what happened. I'm free. The courts didn't believe your little sob story. All you did was tear this family apart." "No." Nico shook his head, and Sarah saw tears streaming down his face even as his voice stayed steady. "You tore it apart when you hurt me. You tore it apart when you made me afraid of the person who was supposed to protect me." But Sarah put it back together. She showed me and Papa how to talk to each other. How to be a real family. Vincent's mask of amusement finally cracked, revealing the rage beneath. "Touching, really. But this little speech doesn't change anything. You're still just a broken kid with a disability. And she's," he gestured at Sarah with his gun, "still just a nobody waitress who should have minded her own business. She's my family," Nico said firmly. "She's going to be my mama, and Ethan's my brother, and you can't hurt us anymore because we're not alone. We have each other." The garden's back gate exploded, inward. Dante Moretti came through like an avenging angel, flanked by Marco and at least a dozen heavily armed men. His expensive shirt was torn and splattered with blood, someone else's, Sarah hoped desperately, and his face was set in an expression of absolute fury. "Vincent," he said quietly, and somehow that soft voice carried more menace than shouting ever could. "Step away from my son." Vincent's gun swung toward Nico. "Or what? You'll shoot me in front of the children? Traumatize them even more than I already have? If that's what it takes?" Dante said without hesitation. "You put a gun near my family, Vincent. You lost any protection our blood relationship offered." "Family," Vincent spat the word. "You don't know the meaning of it. You replaced me with her." He gestured violently at Sarah. "Replaced your own blood with some random woman and her bastard son." "Careful." Dante's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You can insult me all you want, but you speak about Sarah or Ethan that way again, and I'll forget we were ever related." The standoff held for another heartbeat. Vincent's eyes darted between Dante's armed men and the boys still too close to him. Sarah could see him calculating odds, looking for an advantage, trying to figure out how to win a situation he was clearly losing. Then Vincent did something that made Sarah's heart stop. He grabbed Nico. The boy was pulled against Vincent's chest before Tony could react. Vincent's gun pressed against Nico's temple. Nico's eyes went wide with terror, his small hands frozen mid-sign. "Here's what's going to happen," Vincent said. "All pretense of civility gone now. You're going to let me walk out of here with the boy. Once I'm somewhere safe, I'll release him. Probably. If I'm feeling generous." "You're not walking anywhere," Dante said, but Sarah heard the fear creeping into his voice. "Let him go, Vincent. This is between you and me." "No. It stopped being between us when you chose them over. Amy. When you believed a child's lies and a stranger's word over your own brother's." Vincent's grip on Nico tightened, making the boy whimper. "You want to know what's funny? I wasn't even trying to hurt him that badly at first. Just toughen him up a little, make him less of an embarrassment. But then I realized how much it bothered you when he couldn't speak, when he withdrew. So I made it worse. I made him afraid because it was the only way to get your attention." "You have my attention now," Dante said, and Sarah could see him struggling to stay calm, to not do anything that might get Nico killed. "You want revenge? Take it out on me. Let my son go." "Your son," Vincent laughed bitterly. "Always your son. Never our organization, our legacy, our family name. Just that broken little..." Nico bit him. The move was so unexpected that everyone froze for a crucial second. Nico's teeth clamped down on Vincent's forearm hard enough to draw blood, and Vincent's grip loosened just enough for the boy to wrench himself free. Nico ran. Not toward his father or the armed men, but toward Sarah, throwing himself into her arms with enough force to knock them both backward. The gunshot that followed was impossibly loud. Sarah felt the impact of the bullet hitting the ground where Nico had been standing a millisecond before, felt the spray of dirt and grass, felt Ethan screaming beside her and Nico's silent sobs against her shoulder. Then Dante was moving, and Sarah had never seen anyone move that fast. He closed the distance between himself and Vincent in 3 strides, hitting his brother with enough force to send them both crashing to the ground. The gun skittered away across the grass. What followed was brutal and efficient. Dante's fists connected with Vincent's face once, twice, 3 times before Marco pulled him back. "Boss, he's done. He's not worth it." Dante stood, breathing hard, his knuckles bloody. He looked at Vincent, his brother, his betrayer, his enemy, and Sarah saw something die in his eyes. Whatever family bond had once connected them had been severed completely. "Take him away," Dante said quietly. "Make sure he understands that if he ever comes near my family again, if he even speaks their names, I'll finish what I started today." As Marco and the others dragged Vincent away, still conscious but barely, Dante turned to where Sarah sat in the grass, both boys clinging to her. He dropped to his knees beside them, his hands shaking as he reached out to touch Nico's face. "Are you hurt? Did he—" "I'm okay, Papa," Nico said aloud, his voice muffled against Sarah's shoulder. "Sarah kept us safe." Dante's eyes met Sarah's over the boys' heads, and she saw everything in that look, gratitude and love and bone-deep relief, and something darker, something that acknowledged how close they'd come to losing everything. "We need to get inside," Sarah said, her voice shakier now that the immediate danger had passed. "The boys need to—" He didn't finish the sentence because Ethan was crying too hard, his small body shaking with aftershock. Nico had gone silent again, but his hands were moving in repetitive, anxious patterns against her shirt. Dante scooped up Ethan while Sarah carried Nico, and together they made their way back into the mansion. The entry hall looked like a war zone, broken furniture, bullet holes in the walls, blood on the marble floors. Mrs. Castellano was being tended to by a medic, a bandage wrapped around her head but otherwise appearing intact. The intruders? Dante asked Marco. 3 dead, 5 in custody. We lost 2 of our own, Davis and Chen. Several others wounded but stable. Marco's expression was grim. Vincent brought a whole crew. This was a full assault, boss. If we hadn't anticipated it. But we did, Dante said firmly. And we survived. That's what matters. They took the boys to Dante's master suite, the most secure room in the house, and spent the next hour just holding them, letting them cry and shake and process the terror they'd experienced. Sarah stroked Ethan's hair while Dante held Nico, both boys gradually calming in the presence of the adults they trusted most. I was so scared, Ethan whispered eventually. The guns were so loud, Mama. And that bad man, he wanted to hurt Nico. I know, baby, but you were so brave. You stayed down like Tony told you. You did everything right. Nico was braver, Ethan said, looking at his friend with wide eyes. He stood up to the bad man. He bit him. Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling. He did, didn't he? Nico pulled back from his father just enough to sign. I remembered what you said. That asking for help is brave, but sometimes being brave means standing up to bad people even when you're scared. You did both. Dante signed back. You told the truth about what Vincent did, and then you protected yourself when he tried to hurt you again. I'm so proud of you, Piccolo. Are we safe now? Nico signed, and the question hung in the air like smoke. Dante looked at Sarah, and she saw the truth in his eyes. Vincent was contained for now, but there would be others. Other threats, other dangers, other moments where their fragile family would be tested. We're together, Dante said finally, signing so both boys could see. And as long as we're together, we can face anything that comes. That's what families do. The aftermath took weeks to sort through. Vincent was charged with attempted murder, assault, and a dozen other crimes related to the attack on the mansion. This time, the evidence was ironclad: dozens of witnesses, security footage from multiple angles, and Vincent's own words captured on the security system. He'll go away for a long time, Dante's lawyer assured them. 20 years minimum, possibly life. But the cost of that victory was high. The mansion needed extensive repairs. 2 of Dante's men had died protecting the family, leaving behind widows and children who now needed support. And the boys, both Ethan and Nico, had nightmares that woke them screaming almost every night. They need therapy, Sarah told Dante one evening, a week after the attack. Real professional help to process this trauma. I know. I've already arranged for Dr. Chen. She specializes in childhood PTSD and comes highly recommended. She'll start working with them next week. And what about us? Sarah asked quietly. What do we need? Dante was silent for a long moment, staring out at the gardens where workers were repairing the damaged gate. I need to know you're not going to leave. That this didn't scare you away. Dante, because I would understand if it did, he continued as if she hadn't spoken. You signed up to help my son communicate, not to dodge bullets and live in fear. You and Ethan, you could still disappear. Start over somewhere peaceful where people like Vincent can't reach you. Sarah crossed to him and took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. I'm not leaving. Yes, what happened was terrifying. Yes, I'm scared. Yes, I lie awake at night thinking about all the ways we could have lost the boys. Her voice softened. But I also think about how Nico ran to me when he was in danger. How Ethan looks at you like you hung the moon. How we've built something real and precious in the middle of all this chaos. Sarah, I love you, she said firmly. I love this family we've created, and I'm not running from it just because love is scary and dangerous and complicated. Because here's what I've learned. Everything worth having is scary and dangerous and complicated. The only question is whether you're brave enough to hold on anyway. Dante kissed her, and it felt like a promise and a plea and a prayer all tangled together. Marry me, he whispered against her lips. Not eventually, not someday, now. Marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing us. Yes, Sarah said, and the word felt like coming home. Yes, I'll marry you. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony in the mansion's garden. Nico and Ethan served as ring bearers, both boys wearing matching little suits and identical proud smiles. Mrs. Castellano actually cried, when Sarah walked down the aisle in a simple ivory dress that made her look like she was glowing from within. The guest list was small, just Dante's most trusted associates, and a few of Sarah's friends from her old life who'd been shocked and a little terrified to learn where she'd ended up. But everyone there understood what this wedding represented. Not just two people joining their lives, but a family forged in fire, tested by violence, and strengthened by love. "Do you, Sarah Chen, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" the officiant asked. Sarah looked at Dante, this dangerous, powerful, complicated man who'd somehow become her partner in everything, and didn't hesitate. "I do." "And, do you, Dante Moretti, take this woman?" "I do," Dante said before the officiant could finish, and laughter rippled through the small gathering. When they kissed, Nico and Ethan cheered so loudly that several of the guards smiled despite themselves. And when Dante scooped up both boys, one in each arm, and pulled Sarah close, so they were all connected, all together, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace, joy, home. "We're a real family now," Nico signed with his free hand, his face radiant. "Forever and ever," Sarah agreed, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Epilogue. 1 year later, Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through the windows of the master bedroom and the sound of children's laughter from somewhere downstairs. She stretched, smiling at the familiar soreness in her muscles from yesterday's chaos. Ethan and Nico's 6th birthday party, complete with a dinosaur-themed bounce house and what felt like every child in Chicago. "Good morning, Mrs. Moretti," Dante murmured beside her, his arm tightening around her waist. "Good morning yourself?" Sarah turned in his embrace, pressing a kiss to his jaw. "Did you know the boys are already awake? I heard them plotting about 20 minutes ago. Something about convincing you to let them have cake for breakfast since it's still their birthday week." Sarah laughed. "That's not how birthday weeks work. Try telling them that." They lay there for a few more minutes, savoring the quiet before the chaos of the day began. So much had changed in the past year. Nico spoke more often now, though he still preferred signing when he was tired or overwhelmed. Ethan was fluent in ASL and used it constantly, even with hearing friends who had to learn to keep up with him. The nightmares had faded, though they still occasionally woke to a scared child crawling into their bed seeking comfort. Dr. Chen said that was normal, that healing from trauma wasn't linear, that some scars lasted forever, but they didn't have to define you. Vincent was serving 25 years to life in a maximum security prison. He tried to appeal, of course, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Dante visited him only once, to make it absolutely clear what would happen if he ever threatened their family again. He looked old, Dante had said when he came home from that visit. Broken. Like prison had already taken everything he was. He'd paused, then added quietly, "I almost felt sorry for him. Almost." Sarah had understood. Vincent was still Dante's brother, would always be his brother on some level, but some betrayals were too deep to forgive, and some people couldn't be saved from themselves. "Mama, Papa." Ethan's voice carried up the stairs. "We made breakfast. Come see." Sarah and Dante exchanged amused looks. Made breakfast probably meant they'd gotten into the pantry and created something that would require cleaning up. They found the boys in the kitchen, with Mrs. Castellano, who was supervising with fond exasperation as Nico and Ethan constructed what appeared to be toast towers with jam and peanut butter. "We're building dinosaur habitats?" Ethan explained seriously. "The T-Rex lives in the peanut butter canyon." "I see," Sarah said, managing to keep her voice straight. "And what does the T-Rex eat?" "Jamberries," Nico signed, grinning. "They're his favorite." As they sat together eating toast towers and listening to the boys' elaborate dinosaur stories, Sarah caught Dante watching her with an expression that still made her heart skip. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking about how different life is now. How much better." He reached across the table to take her hand. "A year ago, I was a man who'd almost lost his son because I was too blind to see what was happening. Now I have 2 sons, a wife I adore, and more joy than I knew was possible." "It's been a good year," Sarah agreed softly. "It's been the best year," Dante corrected. "And I plan to make every year after this even better." "Promise?" Sarah asked, echoing the question she'd asked him so many times. "Promise," Dante said firmly. That afternoon, they took the boys to Navy Pier, their first major public outing without heavy security since the attack. There were still bodyguards, of course, But they kept their distance, letting the family enjoy cotton candy and carousel rides and the simple pleasure of being normal for a few hours. As Sarah watched Ethan and Nico racing ahead toward the Ferris wheel, their hands moving in rapid-fire signs as they argued about who got to ride on the outside, she felt Dante's arm settle around her shoulders. "They're happy," he said quietly. "They are," Sarah agreed. "We all are. I never thought I'd have this," Dante admitted. "This kind of peace. This kind of love. There were years after Maria died when I thought I'd never feel anything but anger and grief." "What changed?" "You walked into a diner and saw my son," Dante said simply. "You saved us both, Sarah. Gave us back to each other. Gave us a family." "You saved me too," Sarah said, leaning into his embrace. "I was drowning before I met you, working myself to death, barely surviving, convinced that was all life had to offer. You showed me there could be more, that I deserved more." They stood there watching their sons, and Sarah thought about that night in the diner that had changed everything. The scared little boy signing for help, the dangerous man who'd become her husband, the series of choices and chances that had led them here. "Mama, Papa, come on." Nico was waving frantically from the Ferris wheel line. "We need to ride together, all of us." "All of us," Ethan echoed, bouncing with excitement. Sarah and Dante joined the boys, and when they all climbed into the Ferris wheel car together, cramped and chaotic and perfect, Sarah felt a contentment so deep it made her eyes burn. This was what she'd chosen that night at the diner. Not safety, not ease, but this messy, complicated, beautiful family. This love that was worth fighting for. As the wheel lifted them higher, giving them a view of Chicago spreading out below like a promise, Nico signed something that made Sarah's heart overflow. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being my mama." Sarah pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "Thank you for trusting me," she signed back. "Thank you for being brave enough to ask for help. Thank you for being my son." Beside them, Dante had Ethan on his lap, pointing out landmarks and answering a million questions about boats and buildings and how Ferris wheels worked. This man who'd once been defined by violence and power was now defined by how gently he held a child who wasn't his by blood, but was his in every way that mattered. "I love our family," Ethan declared suddenly, wrapping his arms around Dante's neck. "I love having a papa and a brother. Can we stay like this forever?" "Forever," Dante promised, and his eyes found Sarah's across the car. "We're not going anywhere. This is home. If you've made it this far, you're amazing." Stories like this take hours to create, so hitting that like button and subscribing really helps me continue bringing you emotional stories, like Sarah and Dante's journey. Drop a comment below telling me what you thought. Did you expect Vincent's attack? Would you have made Sarah's choice? I read every single one and love hearing from you.